Hello once again, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Today is Monday, October the 14th. I'm Zach Ewing. With me, our LSU football beat writer at The Advocate, Wilson Alexander, and our head columnist, Scott Rabalais. We're here to talk. We already did a post-game show, but we'll talk about LSU Ole Miss all week. You could talk about that game for a long time.
That was exciting.
Yeah, LSU's 29-26 victory in overtime over the Rebels. But they got to turn the page quickly, guys. They got Arkansas coming up this week, so no rest for the weary.
No, I mean, as we said, this was going to be the start of a bit of a gauntlet, especially this sort of four-game stretch, starting with Ole Miss, ending with Alabama. That was really going to, I think, define the season and what this LSU team could do. And now they got to go on the road back-to-back weeks in the SEC, Arkansas, then at A&M, and then you can kind of regroup in the bye going into Alabama. But this is an Arkansas team that's 4-2. They're coming off a bye. They obviously beat Tennessee, big upset win. That was big for Sam Pittman in that program. And now LSU's got to go on the road to a place where it tends to play really close games against Arkansas, at least in my recollection here.
Yeah, whether LSU's good and Arkansas's bad or vice versa, it has been. There have been close games over the years. It just seems like Arkansas catches LSU for a long time, caught them after the Alabama game on the schedule, and now they're catching them after the Ole Miss game, which is very emotional, big, and it's just a little hard to get fired up for a trip to Fayetteville and take them as seriously as you take this threat from Ole Miss. But it's a very real game for LSU that is dangerous, as all their games are the rest of the season. I think anyone would say they could win or lose any of the games remaining on their schedule. They'll probably win most of them, but can they win enough of them to get in the college football playoff? That is what their season looks like at this point. At least they're in a position to be in that conversation. Yeah. And it started with Ole Miss, and it continues with Arkansas this week.
You got halfway through the season. You're still in the conversation after that opening loss, so we'll see if LSU can keep it going. It's an exciting time. We're going to recap that exciting game a little bit more and talk about that. Want to let you know that the LSU Sports Insider is sponsored by Waste Pro. Tiger fans, if you're planning a tailgate or event, keep your guests comfortable with portable toilets from Waste Pro. Call 225-744-6400 and mention the LSU Sports Insider for a special offer. Subscribe to the LSU Sports on NOLA.com YouTube channel. You can follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Wherever you're following us, leave a review, a comment, hit the like button. Sign up for notifications, all that good stuff. Channels are growing all the time. It's a good time to jump on. We're going to have basketball, gymnastics coverage coming up, baseball in the spring, all that good stuff, and continuing through the second half of football season. Okay, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back. We're going to break down the Ole Miss game right after this.
Experience the convenience and cleanliness that Waste Pro brings to Mardi Gras, LSU tailgates, and festivals with our top-notch portable toilet services. Perfect for large crowds and community events. Join the countless satisfied families and organizers who trust Waste Pro to keep their gatherings spotless and sanitary. Discover more about our services and make your next event a success at wasteprousa.com.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
I got off at Blue Bonnet and came around. Zach, that's your advice.
All right, welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider. Guys, Ole Miss, it seems like the game just ended. It's like a 4-hour game. It ended after 11 o'clock. Was it after 11 o'clock? Not quite. I think almost 11 o'clock.
It was right about 11 because I remember filing my story at like 11:10.
Yeah.
It's 4 hours and 16 minutes. So, right at it.
So it feels like it just ended. But if you have collected your thoughts over the 36 hours or you've had a chance to rewatch it, anything, Wilson, that you caught maybe the second time around or thinking about it later that you didn't notice Saturday night?
Well, let me think that I didn't notice Saturday night. I think rewatching the game and kind of going over the stats after the game, I stayed up pretty late Saturday, just writing about the defense and the plan that Blake Baker put in place there to stop Ole Miss and the way that LSU was able to contain Jackson Dart in that Ole Miss passing game in the second half was really impressive. I didn't realize this in real time until later, that Jackson Dart in the second half was like 11 of 25, I think. He and Nussmeier had pretty similar lines in the second half where he completed around 40% of his passes. Dart did in the second half. And maybe some of that was Trey Harris being out of the second half. LSU certainly caught a break there, but also defensively, like, they were competitive with the ball in the air. I thought the corners played as well as they have in probably the past 2 years. And just in general, they were getting a lot of pressure. Whit Weeks was all over the place. And another element of that is, remember in last year's game, LSU, this is going off of Pro Football Focus numbers, tackling was a huge issue, especially in the secondary and on the on the edges. And the LSU missed 18 tackles. On Saturday night, they missed, according to PFF, 9. Like, it wasn't like fantastic. I guess there was some moments like, the 50-yard touchdown run that Ole Miss had in the first half. Like, LSU missed a tackle here or there, but like, especially out wide, the corners and the safeties, I thought, had one of their better tackling games of the season, and that made a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think this was probably the first time that we've seen the Blake Baker hire really pay off for LSU. They faced some overmatched opponents. The USC effort was better, but it wasn't spectacular. South Carolina, obviously, they struggled. So this was the first time we really saw that defense. I don't know if they won the game for LSU, but they certainly did their part, Rab.
Well, they kept them in it when the offense was struggling to find the end zone, or settling for field goals, or not even able to get into scoring position. The scoreless first quarter, kind of scuffled through the second quarter, and again, LSU takes the ball. They win the toss to take the ball. It puts them in position, trailing at halftime, to go down double digits again to start the second half. But the defense stopped them. And there was one key sequence. I thought after Nussmeier threw the interception, Jackson Dart threw an interception in the end zone that Zy Alexander had. Then Nussmeier throws one up on the next play. And then they go 3 and out in that position. Again, LSU is trailing by 4. If Ole Miss drives down for a touchdown, the game's certainly not over, but you're in a bind. And they get a pass breakup. They get another pass deflection. They get a sack. And it's 3 and out for Ole Miss when they had the ball in really good field position around their 40 or something like that. So that's something we saw very much of the defense the other night. And I got to say, I think they helped fire up the crowd with all those sacks. I mean, everyone loves offense and everything, but as I've said before many times, a lot of LSU's program's identity is based on its defense. The Chinese Bandits back in the 1950s, and Tommy Casanova, and the Honey Badger, and Glenn Dorsey, and players like that. These are the
entire Les Miles era.
Yeah, these are beloved players, and these are things that you could often count on for LSU. Billy Cannon's punt return is a footnote if he and Warren Rabb don't stop the Ole Miss quarterback on the goal line at the very end of the game. So. Defense is big, and they had another in the south end zone. Seems like what always happen, and the south end zones where LSU, Ole Miss misses a field goal, they get the ball back. They try to go on 4th down, and I think it was Braden Swinson sweeps in off the end and gets drops the runner for a 1-yard loss.
Credit to the rest of the defensive front for just winning at the point of attack, allowing him to kind of come off the edge there and make that tackle. It was a group effort there, but Swinson certainly made the play.
It's starting to resemble the LSU defense. The secondary made plays at times with tight coverage that reminded me of what they used to do back in the Nick Saban days. So, but all that leading up to just a great atmosphere. Tiger Stadium was full. It was loud. Wilson is sitting probably even closer to me
than we are right now. Yeah.
Than we are right now, and we have to talk very loudly to make each other heard.
We didn't have to yell at each other like we sometimes have in the past. Like, I remember the Florida game in 2019. Like, when Brooks Cavina, our former colleague, was with us, like, he and I had to yell at each other to hear each other. I think Alabama in 2022 was similar in that regard, but it was some of the best. I mean, the second best game I think I've covered in Tiger Stadium behind that overtime win over Alabama. I mean, the crowd was fantastic the entire night.
And the lights, they passed out the lighted wristbands.
That was really cool. Yeah. They did such a good job with it.
I felt like it found its footing, that show. I feel like I wish that the lights were like a little bit brighter. I don't know. From our vantage point, all those lights were like really tiny.
When
I watched the broadcast,
when I watched the broadcast, they seem more noticeable than they did from the press box.
I'm just gonna bang things around here. Yeah, I do wonder a little bit of that was probably made for TV. It probably looked really good on television. So, look, all around great night. I think just a classic Tiger Stadium Saturday night, right? Ole Miss even Caden Davis makes a 57-yard field goal, one of the more clutch field goals you'll ever see.
After missing a 32-yarder earlier in the game.
to force LSU to have to score a touchdown if they wanted to win the game. And then they do it in one play. Rab, as you said, that was something Nick Saban used to say, is to go for it all on the first play of overtime, especially when you're only down a field goal, because the other team doesn't necessarily expect you to just go for the jugular like that. And Kyron Lacey probably gets away with a push-off, if we're being honest. Watching that replay, it was actually worse than I thought it was live. But, hey, and this brings me into what you wanted to talk about, Rab. The game had gone on long enough at that point, and the refs may have felt that as well. We had, what'd you say, it was 6 replay reviews? 6
replay reviews in the game Saturday night. None in the first or third quarters, but 3 in the second and 3 in the fourth. And so that added to the length. 240, and this is me just timing it roughly from the time the referee says the play is under review to when he takes off the headset. 2 minutes and 48 seconds, 209, 130, 244, 130 again, and then like 114. So, but it seemed like there were more replays than that even. There were. It was just a lot, and they were kind of clustered together, especially in the fourth quarter. So, that to me seems like something that could be addressed in college football. Obviously, it's not something that's an LSU issue or just an SEC issue. It's a college football issue, and I just thought of the people who stayed till the very end because it was an overtime game, and then they're driving home to not, South Downs and Baton Rouge like I do, but to New Orleans or Lafayette or Alexandria or the Gulf Coast after that game, and it was I think it's something that college football needs to consider with these numerous and sometimes interminable reviews. And then one of the reviews, they had to fix the clock.
Injuries.
Huh?
And fake injuries.
Well,
yeah.
There were clearly a couple. Not as many as I expected to see going back, but there was one where Sean McDonough just calls it out. The guy, he gets the signal from the sideline and he goes down, and it's obvious. It is extremely obvious.
There was a sniper, an invisible sniper somewhere.
Right,
the guy
right. And I'm sorry, I was staring at my phone here, Rab. I was actually looking at your tweets from the game as a way to time this. LSU's game tying drive took about 3 minutes of game time. Mm-hmm. They got the ball with 3:14 left, and they scored the touchdown with like 20 seconds left, right?
27, yep.
Yeah, so it takes a little bit less than 3 minutes of game time. It took 19 minutes, according to Scott Rabalais tweets, which is a very scientific way of measuring this stuff. At 10:20, he said they got the ball, they needed a touchdown. At 10:39 is when Nussmeier throws. It shouldn't take 19 minutes. There were no TV commercials built into that. Maybe there was one.
Keep in mind that LSU also had multiple fourth downs on that drive that it had to convert. Like, there was a bunch of incomplete passes on that drive. Nussmeier was 4 of 11 on that drive.
11 pass attempts in one drive.
Yeah, and so it's like there was a lot of stoppages also just kind of, within a football game that you would normally kind of, as a result of like just the way football works.
Right, but you had the injuries and the reviews. And I don't want to make this too much of like old man yelling at cloud.
I feel like we're going way off on a rather long tangent here.
but it's I don't know. They're long games, and LSU's first 2 SEC games have both been over 4 hours now. So hopefully a trend that doesn't necessarily continue. Maybe not so dramatic. But let's talk about our keys to the game. And our keys to the game segment is proudly sponsored by Waste Pro. Ensure your tailgate or event is a hit with clean and convenient portable toilets from Waste Pro. Rent yours today. And I'm sorry, we're going to do our star player segment first. But I just said our star player segment is brought to you by Waste Pro. Our star player, you mentioned him, Wilson, is Whit Weeks.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
It's just ridiculous.
He has 18 tackles, which is absurd. But on top of that, he has a sack. He has a forced fumble. And the sack was right at the end of regulation just to prevent Ole Miss from having any chance of trying to win it at the very end with a Hail Mary. He was so active, just all over the field, flying over the place. And Whit's so fun to talk to because I think his nickname is Sunshine on the team, and it goes. I think it works in 2 ways. One, it started because last year he grew out his hair and he looked like Sunshine from Remember the Titans. But then it's also just like his disposition is really sunny. Like he's always like really happy when you're talking to him. And I know this could maybe be like is this all the time because he's just talking to us? But it's just like there is like he wouldn't just be able to completely turn it off and on. Like he's just like always just like really happy and kind of smiling. He's like, oh, he's like really excited. Like he was like that was great. I was yelling from one side of the field to the other, and he's got this great Georgia accent too. I mean, it's just fun to listen to him talk, and he played a fantastic game, really did, and deserves the star player thing because he's come on so much over the last couple of weeks in particular, where he's just super active around the line of scrimmage. You could see it last year as a freshman, but his technique and his development has gotten even better, and he's turning into a star on this team for sure.
And again, one of those reviews, the first one, was the review of the targeting flag that was originally called on him with 149 left in the second quarter.
If he's ejected for targeting.
If he's ejected, then they miss somebody making some key plays. But he was there, like you said, he was everywhere.
This game if he was ejected.
Yeah, you hate to pin it on one thing, but a game that close.
Because you'd have to go to a freshman linebacker playing a major minutes in Xavier Atkins, and instead you have Whit Weeks on the field.
Against a team that has a lot of eye candy and motion and all these things. It would have been difficult.
But he's making tackles in the backfield and going outside, and then he was back in coverage on one of the plays that they broke up in the end zone. It's like
right before the goal line in overtime.
Yeah. So Whit Weeks, well deserved, and that enthusiasm you're talking about that he just kind of has for life. He plays that way. He plays enthusiastic. I mean, he gets up and he's fired up, and I don't know that most people would think he's a nice guy, this nice jovial personality the way he plays, but it's that enthusiasm, right?
Absolutely, it is. I mean, you can see it in everything that he's doing. He's really become I think he has become sort of the emotional heart of this defense a little bit, which is, a linebacker is a good position to get that from because he's in the middle of everything. But he's also clearly has like a good relationship with Braden Swinson. Whit gave Braden a lot of credit for his sack at the end of regulation because he said that Braden, the way that that play went, basically made that happen for him. And when they got to the sideline, Braden Swinson told him as much, like, I made that happen for you. And Whit was like, yeah, I know, man, thanks. And you could see them on social media yesterday, hyping each other up. Some former LSU players, I think, were talking about Whit Weeks too. He's becoming really that, like I said, emotional heart of this defense. I think every player really likes to rally around him. And it's not just him. I mean, Greg Penn is the one in the middle of the field getting everybody lined up, as Brian Kelly said. But Whit is super athletic. He's really fast. He can do a lot of different things. He's getting downhill and he's aggressive in attacking the ball. And it's making a big difference for this team.
Yeah, and give Blake Baker his flowers too, because that probably doesn't. This whole unit is under his control, and this is not a conversation we had once last year. So without Harold Perkins, Whit Weeks steps up. He's our star player. Okay, now we're going to get into our Keys to the Game segment. I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. And the Keys to the Game segment is proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. And we talked about some of the keys to the game, and I think LSU hit on a lot of these. Limit the big plays, okay? Ole Miss had the 150-yard run. LSU probably gets a little bit lucky. Trey Harris drops that pass on the first drive. That could have been a huge explosive play. But other than that, they mostly made Ole Miss work, and it works out in their favor because Ole Miss settled for 5 field goal attempts, made 4 of them. Time of possession, I don't think LSU dominated like we talked about. They certainly didn't get off to a good start. But the one I highlighted on the graphic here, they had 6 sacks and didn't give up a single one against the team, Wilson, that led the country in sacks coming in.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was, I think, one of the biggest differences in this game. And Brian Kelly said post-game that basically the reason they were able to win it at the very end there was the offensive line was keeping Nussmeier clean all night. I mean, Ole Miss led the country, like you said, with 24 sacks. Ole Miss and LSU did not give up any. You saw a video from the locker room. Kyron Lacey was doing a live stream, and Will Campbell, I can't say it on air what he said, but he was very confident in what he had done to shut down Ole Miss and the edge rushers that it had coming to that game. And this is now, I think that you can criticize this offensive line for its run blocking. That has not been great. LSU in this game rushed for 3.5 yards per carry. I mean, it was getting nothing from the run game whatsoever. But the pass pro on this team, especially from the tackles, is fantastic. LSU has now played 2 of the best pass rush defenses in the SEC to this point, South Carolina and Ole Miss. And shut them down both times. South Carolina had 2 sacks. They were doing some good stuff early in the game against LSU, but both of those sacks, like I said, were in the first half, and the offensive line settled in. And now to hold Ole Miss without a sack, also only allowed 3 tackles for loss, which isn't a bad number. They were able to really control this game up front, and that's a big reason why they won in the end, was because of it.
I mean, who would have thought that we'd be saying the defense really helped them, especially helped them win the game, especially after the last year's game when they lost it. I mean, LSU scores 49 points. You should win the game if you're LSU, and they gave up 55 at Ole Miss. But there were 3 and outs. There were pass breakups. There were certainly sacks and affecting Jackson Dart. You can't just let him sit back there and just throw the ball without some pressure on him, and you could tell a lot of times in the game where it affected him. Yeah, losing Trey Harris late in the game, he was in street clothes by the end of the game, watching from the bench with a hip injury. He was tremendous when he was in the game, except for that drop. But that helped LSU. But LSU was without some of its best receivers as well. So that washes both ways. But it's a defense that's improving, and when we've heard Brian Kelly say in recent weeks the team is improving and they're coming, and you can dismiss it as coach speak, but I think there was clear evidence of it Saturday night against what is arguably the most explosive offense they've played so far. Now, Ole Miss has not been explosive in SEC play. They're averaging about 23 points a game in SEC play.
They're having struggles up front. They really are.
Yeah, they've had some offensive line injuries, and I think LSU was really able to take advantage of that on the defensive side with 6 sacks.
But that's just an issue that you say, well, LSU got lucky there. But this, we look at all the litany of players LSU's been without. I saw Harold Perkins congratulating somebody after a play on the sideline. But it doesn't take away from the fact that a guy like Whit Weeks has become a star on this team, and Braden Swinson has become a star on this team and in college football in general. And you have to credit those players, and you have to credit to the entirely new revamped defensive staff that Brian Kelly brought in, led by Blake Baker, who Wilson Alexander, if you hadn't read that very nice feature he wrote in Saturday's paper. Blake Baker is very interesting.
You can find it on The Advocate. What a great website.
The Advocate anti-jinx. Had a great game.
That's right.
The other thing I wanted to mention was, like you said, LSU didn't do a great job of stopping the run. I think that was one of the keys coming into this game was stop the run. I mean, Ole Miss had 5.9 yards per carry when you adjust it for sacks. There was that big 50-yard touchdown. But LSU was able to not let that run game get going enough to give Ole Miss super manageable third downs. Ole Miss was averaging 9.7 yards to go on third down. A lot of that had to do with getting pressure, creating sacks, that kind of thing to set up long third downs. And this was the other part of it. This is a wild stat to me. Ole Miss had 22 third downs in this game.
Wow.
You don't see that. 13, 12 is a normal number in a game. And now they went 11 for 22. It's not great giving up 50% on third down. But the fact that LSU was consistently putting Ole Miss into having to convert third downs was a big part of this game, because Ole Miss's offense, it likes to get up tempo, and that's when it starts to hit explosive plays and find its rhythm. And Ole Miss was, especially after it went up 17-7, so for most of the second half in particular, was never able to get into that. And LSU forced the issue and was really successful in doing so.
Yep. So those are our keys to the game. LSU, obviously, with the big win. Tiger fans, Associated Grocers is hiring. Join a team committed to the success of independent retail grocers. Apply today at Associated Grocers and be part of something great. Real quick, before we take our second break, today's injury report brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic. No real new injuries for LSU Saturday night. Now, Chris Hilton and C.J. Daniels both did miss the game. They obviously have some guys out for the season.
Kyle Parker got added to that list this week.
Kyle Parker, but they at least didn't add to it, which is always good.
No, it looked very, very scarily for LSU at a moment that they might lose Karen Lacey. He's down on the field. He's pointing to his knee, and turns out he just hyperextended it. Watching the replay last night,
it didn't look good.
It just he hyperextended it, and I'm sure that makes you think that I've done something really bad to the knee. And you can see Austin Thomas Wilson on the sideline telling someone it looks bad.
It looked bad on the broadcast.
Lacey, we talked to him after the game, and I said, "What happened?" He's like, "Yeah, hyperextended." He was like, "It looked nasty." He goes, "And it felt nasty." But I was like, how did you only miss one play? after that?
One play.
And he was like, just got to dig deep kind of thing.
He's
He was like
probably
very
pretty
nonchalant
sore
about
today.
it. And I was like, all right. Well,
He's probably still pretty sore, but we'll see about his status for Arkansas.
and also, just as a real quick, we'll get updates as we go through the week on the two guys who missed the game at receiver, C.J. Daniels and Chris Hilton. Hilton dealing with that stress fracture, Daniels with an apparent knee injury of some kind. We don't know the specifics on that. We'll see if either of them can get back for the Arkansas game as we go through the week.
All right. The injury report is brought to you by the Baton Rouge Clinic, your trusted healthcare provider in the heart of Baton Rouge. Whether you're in need of primary care, specialist services, or urgent care, the Baton Rouge Clinic has you covered with a team of dedicated and experienced professionals. Visit BatonRougeClinic.com to learn more or to schedule your appointment today. The Baton Rouge Clinic, caring for generations. All right, you're watching the LSU Sports Insider podcast. That's kind of our recap of Ole Miss. We're going to take our second break here, and when we come back, we'll go around the SEC and we'll turn the page to LSU's trip to Arkansas.
You know how far I've gone, now I'm home again. I'm feeling more alive these days than I've ever been.
At the Baton Rouge Clinic, our sole focus is to provide exceptional health care for your entire family so that you can get back to doing what you love most. We are caring for generations.
You gave me love.
Since 1988, Classic Industrial Services, Inc. has led the industry in specialty contracting. From thermal insulation to scaffolding, coatings, and beyond, we cover it all. Every minute matters in our commitment to quality and safety. We're here to serve with roofing, siding, heat trace, and refractory services. Visit ClassicIndustrial.com for more information.
Welcome back to the LSU Sports Insider podcast. We're going to go around the SEC. It's brought to you by Classic Industrial Services, because at Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. Guys, during LSU's bye week, this just crazy week in the SEC where Alabama and Tennessee lose, Texas A&M routes Missouri. It wasn't quite that crazy Saturday, but it almost was, because Alabama and Tennessee both escaped at home with wins. Alabama just trying to give the game away against South Carolina. Tennessee had to hold on and beat Florida. And then you had Texas routing Oklahoma. What was your top takeaway from the SEC, Rab?
That right now the SEC looks like Texas is clearly the best team, and then there's a large group of teams behind them that all have some flaws and question marks that are vying to be the team that looks like will play them in Atlanta for the SEC championship. And that includes LSU, Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee. There's just a bunch of teams there. Ole Miss is behind that group now, so it looks like any of those teams could win a championship game, obviously. But that's what it looks like right now. It's Texas, the newcomer, and then a bunch of schools that are trying to vie for that other spot.
Wilson, we also had another Vanderbilt victory, 2-1 Commodores now.
It's the Commodores are a legitimate, they're not a legitimate championship contender, but they are more than just a team that you can't overlook them this year.
Right.
And LSU's they're gonna come to Tiger Stadium at the end of November. And when the start of the season, you thought, oh well, that'll be a nice sort of soft game before going into Oklahoma and kind of at the end of the season and all that. Now it's like, could that be more difficult? I was about to say, could that be more difficult than going on the road to Florida? I don't know about that. You still have to go on the road to Gainesville, but it's not. It's a game where all of a sudden, you got to really take Vanderbilt seriously this year, going on the road after beating Alabama, because it's that's the thing we're talking about LSU here this week, going on the road to Arkansas. You're going to have to be able to manage your emotions after a big win like that and not get too far ahead of yourself. Vanderbilt did a good job of that. Big, huge program-defining win against Alabama. Then you go on the road in the SEC and are able to beat Kentucky. That's a sign of a program that is being, I think internally led well because you got to be. That's not easy to do. That's kind of a trap game sort of thing.
Yeah,
if you
let down spot.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
And it was a tough game. I mean, going to Kentucky's a tough spot anyway.
It is.
As Georgia found out earlier this year. So one other note, you mentioned the Florida game. Graham Mertz, the Florida quarterback, who's been playing really well, found out this morning torn ACL. He's out for the season.
Right.
So
it'll be
DJ
DJ
Legway, the
Legway,
freshman, is going to take over for the Gators. But Mertz was starting to play really well. So that's a blow to Florida as well. All right. Classic Industrial Services is proudly serving Louisiana and the entire United States with high-quality scaffolding erection, metal siding and roofing, thermal insulation services, refractory services, and much more. From large capital projects to commercial projects or your smaller quick response needs, Classic Industrial is your go-to for quality and safety. They're not just about business, they're a proud community partner supporting local initiatives and helping build a stronger Baton Rouge. At Classic Industrial Services, every minute matters. Okay, time to turn the page to Arkansas. We're going to start with our sports betting segment. And that is sponsored by the Queen of Baton Rouge. Experience the thrill of game day at 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails, your premier destination for elevated sports entertainment. Filling in for Thomas Casale today on the sports betting segment is Gabe Henderson.
Hello, everybody. This is Gabe Henderson with the sports betting tip of the week. LSU's coming off a huge overtime victory over Ole Miss that sees the Tigers jump into the top 10 of the AP poll and keep their college football playoff hopes alive. Next up is the battle for the Golden Boot against the Arkansas Razorbacks, who have already registered a top 10 win at home this year when they beat Tennessee. LSU opens up as a 3-point road favorite at DraftKings Sportsbook, which might seem a little low considering the caliber of the win they just had. However, it's easy to forget the last 4 games between these two sides have been decided by 3 points, which is exactly why I'm staying away from this spread and I'm playing the total instead. The over-under is set at 55 points. Only 2 games between these two sides have gone over this point total in the past 10 years, and that was in 2019 and 2023 when LSU had Heisman-winning quarterbacks leading their offense. These teams are 5-7 toward the under this year, so they typically lean under with their scrappy defenses, which is why I don't mind paying the minus 112 price at DraftKings Sportsbook. We'll be back later in the week with another sports betting tip. Until then.
Experience the
All right. Thank you, Gabe. And Tiger fans, you can catch all the sports action at the Queen Casino's DraftKings Sportsbook Bar and 1717 Kitchen and Cocktails with top-notch screens and live betting. It's the ultimate spot to watch your favorite teams and enjoy a cold brew or signature cocktail. The Queen Casino is the only land-based casino in Baton Rouge and your go-to for game day or any day. Visit today and elevate your sports watching experience.
I have a question for our host.
All right.
Who does a thing or two about sports gambling. LSU opened as a 3-point favorite against Arkansas. How much is that influenced by beating Ole Miss? Because I thought it'd be close, really closer than that. Pick 'em. Maybe it opened at 2.5, and it's gone up to 3. But
I think it's probably influenced a little bit. Most of the time, the sports books are not going to make huge adjustments based on one game.
Right.
And it would have been different if LSU had come out and beat Ole Miss by 4 touchdowns and really looked like a national championship contender. They didn't. They won the game. It's obviously a positive. I think it probably speaks more to just where they are with Arkansas. I mean, I know you expressed a little surprise LSU was favored by 3. It's going to be a tough game. And I mean, we look at Arkansas, Wilson, like, they're 4-2. They're 3-0 at Razorback Stadium. Their losses are to Oklahoma State in a close game, an overtime game. I believe it was
double
overtime. Right? Yeah, double overtime game, and then to Texas A&M in Arlington, who we know how good Texas A&M is now. And those were both close losses. They beat Tennessee. I mean, they played a lot of close games. There's no reason to expect this one to be any different.
No, there certainly isn't. This is a game that LSU is going to have to make sure it is preparing really well for this week, because this is an Arkansas team that actually has been sort of statistically better than LSU defensively. They're only allowing 19.2 points per game. And offensively, they can be kind of tough at times. Bobby Petrino back at Arkansas as the offensive coordinator.
Vroom, vroom.
They've been able to do some decent things. I mean, their last 3 SEC games, they haven't been able to score more than 25 points in all 3 of their SEC games. So, some of those stats are kind of supported by a 70-0 win in week 1 over Arkansas Pine Bluff. But, they I think defensively in particular have done a pretty good job. I mean, holding Auburn to 14 points, A&M to 21 points, Tennessee to 14 points. And, especially in that Tennessee game, being able to upset a team that still looks like a potential playoff contender like that is really impressive. I mean, Tennessee's offense hasn't seemed as imposing as it did early on this season. Not quite sure what's going on with the Vols, but Arkansas is clearly a team that again, kind of like we were talking about almost in a way with Vanderbilt, even though Arkansas has always been I think a tier above Vanderbilt, is that you have to, I think LSU lock back in after an emotional victory like that. It's sort of that cliche 24-hour rule. They're gonna have to do a really good job of preparation this week in order to be able to go and win on the road in the SEC. They've done it once this year at South Carolina, but going on the road now to Arkansas is going to be a similar sort of challenge, especially at playing at night over there.
I would almost be more impressed if LSU could win this game than I was with the Ole Miss win. And I'm not saying Arkansas is better than Ole Miss, but for one thing, you're at home, obviously, but you come off the bye week. Everything, and let's be honest, I mean, we talked about it on this show for weeks, guys. Everything was leading to that Ole Miss game for weeks. It wasn't just the bye week. South Alabama, UCLA, these teams were not going to beat LSU at Tiger Stadium. It was never going to be very likely. And so you could really turn your attention towards game planning for that Ole Miss game. You had Tiger Stadium at night. You had the emotion of the rivalry. You had all that. And LSU won the game. Now, like you said, you can celebrate that for 24 hours. Then you got, 5 days to get ready for an 11 a.m. kickoff?
No, it's 6 p.m.
Oh, 6 p.m. I'm sorry, 6 p.m. kickoff. But still, in Fayetteville against a good team, coming off of that emotional high, Rab, and you've got to find a way to get back up.
Yeah, this is where you have to be a mature team, and this is where you figure the leadership of a guy like Brian Kelly, who's coached in a big game or two in his career, will has to pay off. And look, hats off to Arkansas. I remember hearing Sam Pittman speak at SEC Media Days in Dallas this summer, thinking, this guy is on his way out. I mean, hiring Bobby Petrino is just a last gasp, desperate move, and they've made it work so far. That Tennessee win was huge. They rushed the field for beating Tennessee, like LSU did after beating Ole Miss. So, always a tough game for LSU. It just seems like going to Arkansas. It's not, you have to respect them, but it's not like going to Alabama. It's not like going to Auburn. It's not like going to Florida or Texas A&M. It's like you have to. They're going to look at that game film and see how they respect Arkansas, which they should. A team that has a quality win in its belt and would love to knock off a top 10 ranked LSU team. It would have made a great deal to their season.
I think LSU matches up fairly well in this game because it seems like Arkansas' strength is probably on the defensive side, and LSU's offense. Garrett Nussmeier's going to have to play a lot better start to finish in this game, and you really want to see LSU kind of get the run game going to a point where it's at least keeping Arkansas, guessing. But if LSU is able to, if those sorts of things are able to happen, and Garrett's able to look like he did in everything leading up to that Ole Miss game, then I feel like LSU, is sort of deservedly the favorite, like we were talking about earlier. Because I feel like defensively, we've seen some good things out of LSU to be encouraged that they can kind of hold down an Arkansas offense that hasn't necessarily been that explosive. But we'll kind of see how it plays out on Saturday.
Yeah. No, I mean, if LSU can find a way to put up 28, 31 points, something, you feel like they're in good shape. But Arkansas hasn't given that up to anybody. So
they played Auburn, which is anemic on offense, and Texas A&M, which seems like it's still trying to.
They manage games though. They're not.
And so, but then Tennessee looked explosive at times this year, but now all of a sudden they don't. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one, and we will talk more about that on Thursday's show. Arkansas too, by the way, would love. I mean, goal number one for them this year is to make a bowl game. They need 2 more wins. They do play Louisiana Tech and Mississippi State. That game's on the road, so you think they can get there, but they would just love to get one more kind of scalp and say, hey, we're not only a bowl team, but we're a high level bowl team. Going forward, and Sam Pittman is the guy. So it's a big game for them, and they're coming off a bye week. So now LSU's kind of in the opposite situation. And we'll see what they can do. But Koki Riley, Reed Darcy will be here Thursday, and we will talk about that game in depth and give our predictions. Until then, for our producer, Amelia Cotton, he's Scott Rabalais, he's Wilson Alexander, I'm Zach Ewing. Thank you for watching the LSU Sports Insider.